Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.
You are watching Breakthrough News, and this is The Freedom Side. Welcome, everybody. I am one of your hosts, Eugene Perrier, here as always alongside my intrepid co-host, Rania Khalek. Rania, good to be back alongside you.
Good to be back on with you, Eugene. Eugene.
Yes.
I have learned something new that I have to show the audience. Are you ready? Let's see if it works.
Oh, Lord.
Come on. It's not. Oh, there it is. Ah! It's what a strange. Listen, I don't know who in vMix, the program that we use for this, created that whole thing, but it's just Lord. A really strange thing we discovered. Like it's a really bizarre. It doesn't seem to be finished.
No, it's
like,
a glitchy
they
AI.
seem to still be working on the code.
Yeah,
they're still working on the code for it because it freezes whenever I do that. So yeah, be careful of your thumbs up. But that's a good way to say, Eugene. I want to let the audience know they should all hit that thumbs up icon. Please hit the thumbs up icon on YouTube. It helps boost us in the algorithm. Make sure you like the show.
Yep, I 100% am support of that. Please do like the show. It does help us in the algorithm, which is, of course, very, very good. And shout out to everybody who is watching us out here, because your hitting of the like button and subscribing is doing a lot to help us. We're well on over 600,000 subscribers on YouTube as well. And if you are not one of those 600-some thousand odd people, now would be a great opportunity for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Then make sure you hit the bell so that you can get the alerts to the things that you have subscribed to. So that way you don't have to work very hard to get easy access to all of our excellent content that we're producing very frequently here at Breakthrough News, including Dispatches with Rania Khalek. Can highly recommend that show as well. So just make it easy on yourself. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get the alerts, and then you won't have to go running or searching or anything like that. It'll be right there for you on your YouTube front page. So, that's just another reminder in addition to the importance of hitting the like button. Rania, what else do you think our viewers should know?
Well, you can also support Breakthrough News by becoming a member by going to patreon.com/Breakthrough News, where you can access exclusive content as well as get some really cool merch, such as this very cool mug. Sorry, I'm like moving very slowly.
Other side up. You're good.
Eugene's got the other side of it. Thank you. I don't want to drop it on the keyboard here.
Perfect.
So yeah, do become a member if you can. It helps support all of our great work here at Breakthrough News. And I think one of the most important things you can do in 2024 is support independent media, bringing you the news, informing you about the world when everything else corporate lies. So there you have it.
Yes, indeed. You do have it there. So you've got all of your marching orders, of course. Hit subscribe and hit the bells that you're following us. Make sure vis-a-vis this particular show that you hit the thumbs up so that we can get boosts in the algorithm for your like. Oh, my God. And also, wow.
Oh my God. That's totally new.
Please go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News, because as you can see, we're doing our absolute best to bring you a very professional show. And
I'm sorry. It's what do you expect? How am I supposed to act when all these very cool animations take place, Eugene, that I'm seeing for the first time?
Well, listen, I'm not here to police your behavior.
Can't take ourselves too seriously.
So, whatever you think is right.
Can't take ourselves too seriously.
Well, that's okay. Either way, I'm probably going to have to write into vMix here and determine how these AI things even got placed in our algorithm. But nonetheless, patreon.com/breakthrough news. Please become a patron, become a donor. Hit the thumbs up button so that we can get boosted in the algorithm here in the show. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so that way you can be following us. And of course, now that we are about to be off to the races, it would be a great opportunity for you to, however you so choose, via your social media, via a phone call, via whatever method of communication you would like to use, let folks know that we are here and we are getting ready to go all around the world. Quite frankly, we've got so many different topics we can't even really list them all. Pakistan, Congo, NSA spying here in the United States, an excellent new novel out of Palestine, as well as NATO and everything surrounding that after Trump's, so-called controversial comments. So a lot there. So let folks know we are here. And on that note, Rania, I think we can transition here into our first topic, and that is Pakistan, where there has been quite the electoral move recently there. Of course, candidates affiliated with former Prime Minister Imran Khan did by far the best of any other candidate, but there's a lot happening surrounding all of this, and we are very, very honored to be here, joined here once again by Junaid Ahmed, who's a professor of religion, law, global politics, and also the director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Decoloniality in Islamabad, Pakistan. Junaid, thanks so much for being back with us.
Eugene, Rania, it's always a pleasure, although I'm not sure what serious analysis I can give after those very cool animations. I'll try my best.
See,
thank you. I appreciate that.
I love how humble you are.
Excellent. Well, we will all do our best here. Rania set us off in a great way. But, Junaid, this is, obviously was huge news, an electoral earthquake, really, in Pakistan. Maybe for those who haven't been following, give us some context for why it is such a big deal that, candidates affiliated with the former prime minister were able to gain the most votes in this most recent election.
Well, there's plenty of context, but I'm going to try to give what the immediate context was with this victory of former Prime Minister Imran Khan's political party, even though, and viewers will get a sense of what's going on, his political party was banned from participating in these elections. And therefore, whatever was left of the party, because it confronted deep repression by the state since the ouster of Imran Khan from power in April 2022, which was the work of both the United States, the military establishment in Pakistan, as well as the usual kleptocratic politicians. So I think that no one was expecting, myself included, probably not even former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who's languishing in a horrible jail cell right now, but no one was expecting, because of this enormous repression, totalitarian forms of suppression of all dissent, and especially targeted to this party, because they're the only party that represents somewhat of a threat to the powers that be, both domestic and foreign. But lo and behold, still, again, the party, which were all of them were running as independents, they weren't allowed to run from the party known as PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the Movement for Justice, and they secured the most seats in parliament. So all of us were surprised at this miraculous development, considering the way they have been brutally targeted, tortured, forced to renounce politics by blackmailing all of them, which took away more than half of the leadership of the party. So that context is actually one which makes these developments so unbelievable.
This also comes, you mentioned, after all of this interference in Pakistani politics by the military establishment and, of course, the United States, which we know now actually did, in fact, interfere in Pakistan. You have Imran Khan, who's in detention. And obviously, you would imagine that would impact the elections. It's interesting to me that people are still supportive of his party, despite the repression, despite the fact that he's been placed in detention. Can you update us on what's happening with Imran Khan in detention? Is he going to be staying in detention? Is there an effort to get him out? And how is that impacting the ability of people to be active? I mean, would there have been even more support for his party had it not been for all this repression?
Yeah, so perhaps a little more context may be useful here. So former Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted in a so-called vote of no confidence in parliament. Now we know that what he was saying at that time, quite publicly, which most people, I mean, maybe his party members, but in terms of the military establishment, Washington, and of course our politicians, but also significant chunks of our intellectual class, really considered him a conspiratorial nutcase at that time. And it was only after a year, more than a year after that, when the online publication, The Intercept, published the contents of this very famous, what's called a cipher, or an official diplomatic cable that was sent from the Pakistan ambassador to the United States, to the Pakistan Foreign Ministry, in which he is lectured about Khan's aggressive neutrality. It's an oxymoron in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Now, the unfortunate luck of Khan was that he arrived in Moscow the day that they launched the special military operation, and so he was compelled by forces left, right, and center to immediately condemn and denounce Putin while he's shaking his hand, which is ridiculous. Khan was there to obtain cheap gas, cheap wheat as well, but that to the United States seemed like a problem and what they called aggressive neutrality. And so in that cipher, they basically are saying that, look, we really have a problem with your prime minister. I mean, very openly saying this. And if you remove him, all will be forgiven. So I don't think it can get clearer than that. And so at that time when Khan was like waving, I don't think he had the exact document because they kind of tried to hide it. But this is what he was saying, that yes, this is a conspiracy or just like a typical regime change operation with these forces. Like I said, most people didn't believe it. The Washington and the military establishment believed that this would eradicate the Khan virus, as I call it, Khan for politics. It did not. They resorted to a whole bunch of new plans to put a whole bunch of charges against him. That didn't work. Assassination attempts. That didn't work. And then finally, when this the Intercept leaks this cipher or diplomatic cable, then the United States, first of all, the State Department in the U.S. says that, look, even though we've been denying it, maybe it did exist, maybe we did put this pressure, but this is normal interaction between two governments, which is, of course, it's not. And the Pakistani military establishment also denying this, then in a bizarre way, they then accuse Khan for committing treason. You leaked a top secret diplomatic cable that threatens our national security, which is absolutely, obviously bogus. It threatens, it reveals the way in which all of these forces were responsible for that regime change. So Khan has been in jail since August of last year. And we're not talking about ordinary jail, isolated and just wretched conditions there. But he's been steadfast. In the past, we've had civilian prime ministers removed from power, but usually they make a safe exit to Dubai or Saudi Arabia or London, and the military is fine with that. Khan refused that throughout this period. And he says, no, I'm not leaving, I'm not going anywhere. And I think that that's part of the inspiration to the many that, regardless of whether they're in the political party or not, but seeing the way this guy has been steadfast throughout this ordeal, and I think that explains to a large extent why the people defying the way that the military establishment interfered in these elections, interfered is putting it euphemistically, but rigged, all of these things to facilitate their guy in the Nawaz Sharif group in the Pakistan Muslim League. This is one of the main two political parties, trying to facilitate his coming to power. I mean, they would not even have won half of their parliamentary seats without the rigging of the military. And so now we're in a situation in which the Chief of Army Staff, General Asim Munir, and the military high command, are receiving harsh criticisms, even from the U.S. State Department, from members of Congress, and now all of a sudden the New York Times, and everyone remembers the situation in Pakistan. But I think that that's also part of the frustration by the State Department, all of these various organs in the United States, of continuously lying about what's going on. And even in these elections, the Khan supporters get the most seats. It really is miraculous. I mean, it's not because I've always said that we consider Khan some revolutionary, but I'm coming to realize that in the Pakistani context, revolutionary is even someone who's mildly pro-democracy and pro-social justice. So that's the situation we have now.
No, I think that's a great overview, and I appreciate that. And it makes me wonder. I mean, obviously now you have Mr. Sharif, who you just mentioned, and the Pakistan People's Party trying to form a government. And it seems like they're hoping they can kind of turn the page on this. Like, even though he won the most seats, we'll combine, we'll form the new government, and we'll just kind of move past it. I mean, how likely is that? I mean, it seems like, one, just such an odd couple marriage politically in and of itself, but it really feels like, sort of wishful thinking that this is it. But it's kind of how it's being reported in the Western media, like, oh, they're going to form this government, it's all over, everything you saw, just forget about that.
Well, I think there's a lot of amnesia within the media and others, because that's exactly what they did when they ousted Khan. Basically, all of the political parties had to get together. They also, blackmailed and paid off many of the members of Khan's party itself to kind of switch horses during that period. And of course, not to mention the military establishment and the United States. So at that time, Khan was confronting all of these very powerful forces, and they thought that it would solve the Khan problem, but it did not. So as I said, at that time, massive outpouring of support followed his removal, which is unprecedented in the removal of any civilian prime minister in the country. And all of these parties thought that getting together will finally solve this problem. And the same thing they're trying to do now. Again, since Khan's party won the most seats in parliament, these other political parties have to combine all of their seats to get the coalition, including the two major political parties that in the past have hated each other. But they realized that the Khan political party, a kind of newbie in the political scene in Pakistan, is really representing a threat because of the popular appeal. I mean, that's not questioned. When we would speak about this before, people would be debating, is he really that popular? And in what sections of society? At this stage, no one can deny that clearly he's by far and away the most popular politician in the country. And so even right now, we have the same things. All of these political parties are coming together. But by now, Eugene and Rania, it's like so much of a farce and a joke that all Pakistanis can see through it. So at the end of the day, I always say that this has been kind of a resounding victory for, of course, Khan, and of course the people of Pakistan, regardless of whether they're supporters of PTI, of this political party, or not. But the fact that they were able to defy the most powerful institution in the country, the military establishment, and still vote that way is certainly a victory for them. And so that's why I want to say that this coalition, once again, that's coming together, it's going to be very unstable. We already see the signs, and one can predict this, of these parties now criticizing each other, and who will have the ministries in government and so on. So the squabbles have already begun, which always happens. The military establishment and these politicians, people consider them antagonists of each other. I've always seen them as partners in crime, sometimes have squabbles between them. It's like an intra-elite battle. So this is the situation we have. Like I said, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm because of what's happened, and because it demonstrably shows which party is the most popular in the country. So I do predict that this is going to be a very unstable government, and the fact that they demonstrated their resistance in these elections, or what we often call the generals' selections, because the chief of army staff always plays kingmaker in these situations. The fact that they were able to get such a resounding victory it does not bode well for the other political parties now trying to form government.
Well, I guess then the one thing I would want to ask after that is, what happens next moving forward?
I guess it's much easier to speak about what's happened before and that context, because
make your predictions and we will come back to you and we will play them for you in a year and see if you were right. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, what does happen next?
Let me get my crystal ball. But it's funny, because I think now a couple of times that I've been on this show, it's kind of like we're still discussing the same thing, and I'm very averse to making predictions in this situation because, again, I mean, the way they had gone after and targeted Khan specifically, and the forms of kind of manipulation of the political process in Pakistan. No one expected this. So, contrary to our expectations, this is still a very powerful tendency and movement within Pakistan. So, as I'm saying, that despite the fact that now they're trying to put together this government, and the chief of army staff right now is getting criticisms from the outside, from Washington itself, and he's kind of just trying to save his own skin and back in this situation. And he's just trying to kind of repay the favor that both the other political parties, but especially the Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz, the House of Sharif, that's the dynastic political party, and he's trying to facilitate them, get the prime ministership, also become chief minister in the largest and most politically powerful province, Punjab. So it seems very clear what he's trying to do, but it's so transparently fraudulent in the eyes of the population. That's why I'm predicting that this will be an incredibly unstable a new coalition government, and that as I often say, the Khan virus has certainly not disappeared. In fact, it's come back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot to follow here and to continue to follow, to keep seeing. I think there's going to be a lot of fallout, so we're going to have to keep bringing you back to keep following this. Really appreciate you as always. Professor Junaid Ahmed, thank you so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Rania?
Oh, Pakistan. I remember after Imran Khan was ousted, there was this big debate about whether or not the U.S. had anything to do with it. And there was all these people who were like, no, the U.S. had nothing to do with it. I still remember some people, if you're watching, you know who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
now.
well, I mean, yeah, it is unequivocal. And those who were saying, yes, in fact, the U.S. did intervene have been vindicated.
Yeah.
Yet again.
No, I mean, it really was amazing to see. I mean, I was sort of following on social media and the level of, I mean, what Junaid was talking about. I remember like the couple weeks after, Khan was finally jailed, you had all these people who were like top leaders announcing on their social media, I'm no longer involved in politics. I mean, it just seems so bleak. But then over the months, you started to see this kind of grassroots thing happening on different social media channels of people, coming out. And the day before the election, it was amazing. People saying like, this is our moment. This is our time. Come out now. This is the time to show it. So it really, we'll see what happens. But I think for the people of Pakistan, like Junaid was talking about, a really big moment and potentially a huge turning point in terms of how the politics in the country are governed. So a lot to watch there. Obviously a majorly important country. One thing I'll also note, Imran Khan, very outspoken on Gaza and Palestine in general. Also in Kashmir is the other thing that he was maybe was more controversial for him. But nonetheless, many of these other political parties have been pretty quiet since the genocide has been happening. And obviously people in Pakistan are not that friendly. There have been several huge rallies there, but they've been organized by smaller political parties. So these two main parties, the U.S. wanted them in there. It just, it's interesting to look at how these things are playing. But nonetheless, we will move forward to another critically important issue, and that is the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as always, we are very, very honored to be joined for this conversation by Kambale Musavuli, who's an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo Kinshasa. Kambale, as always, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you for continuing to shine a light on the issue.
Oh, no, of course, 100%. Critically important. And, obviously, and I want to get to this, there's been an uptick in fighting in the eastern part of the Congo. But I wanted to start in a slightly different perspective because in relationship to what's happening in Congo, over the past couple of weeks, we've seen protests in front of U.S. embassies, European countries in the capital, denouncing these countries for their role and involvement in the Congo. Tell us, why is it that people are coming out and demonstrating in front of the U.S. embassy and calling them complicit?
I think people are becoming very clear that a country the size of Kinshasa, with a population almost the size of the capital city, right, Rwanda, with 50 million people, does not have a weapons factory, right? Rwanda does not manufacture weapons, and that they get their support from somewhere. And Congolese are clear that their support is coming from the United States, it's coming from the United Kingdom, and it's also coming from France. Those were the three embassies where protests took place. And it was fascinating to see, and I shared with quite a few comrades that This is the first time in my lifetime I've seen Congolese protesting in front of the US Embassy, clearly calling them imperialist forces. Because most of the young people you interviewed, they were clear. They literally say, we know the imperialists are behind Rwanda, we know they are behind Uganda, and we know that they are the one causing the stabilization indirectly, using these African nations to pilfer the Congo, arming rebel groups, and sometimes even having their own soldiers on Congolese soil. But these protests also have to be put in a context. And Congolese are not just protesting against the U.S. embassy, right? They're not just in front of the U.S. embassy. They also have protested the presence of the UN forces, the MONUSCO, for them to leave the country. They are on their way out in 2024, as the Congolese government has agreed not to renew their mandate. But also Congolese are protesting the Congolese government. So as we are discussing this, I want us to have a picture. Hundreds of Congolese are protesting in front of the U.S. embassy. No one was arrested. But Congolese who are challenging the compradors are being arrested. So it should also give us an indication that, yes, the Congolese are clear about the external forces. They're also clear around the internal forces, but it's very difficult for them to challenge the state within the state. Because whenever you are organizing protests against the regime of Tshisekedi, very easily, even a peaceful protest will be turned into that you are trying to destabilize the country, you are an agent of the West or anything of the nature. But Congolese are putting pressure on all negative forces against the Congo, be it local compradors or be it regional countries such as Rwanda and Uganda, and be it also the United States, France, and United Kingdom, as they demonstrated in front of the embassies, calling for these countries to actually close the embassies and leave the Congo so that we could have peace and stability.
Indeed, the U.S. is always, if you just scratch a little below the surface, although in the Congo you don't have to scratch too much, the U.S. is always right there. But I also saw, this is just like more of a recent development that has a lot more to do with the ongoing issue with M23, which I know Rwanda's deeply involved with, and you can talk a bit about that as well, Kambale. But I saw that some South African troops were killed in a recent fighting or a recent attack of some sort. And I was actually surprised. This is maybe my ignorance on the issue of Congo. I didn't realize there were South African troops in Congo. How many, what's going on here? Is this just a South Africa thing? Is this like a regional thing? Why are there South African troops in Congo in this particular area of Goma? And why is there an escalation, it seems, in attacks from these M23 rebels? And please feel free to go into who these people are as well.
And we should even go into why is there a conflict in the Congo? Millions have died. Over 6 million people have died in the Congo. And I've always argued that we may never know how many Congolese people have died, because the figures that I'm even using is a study by the IRC saying that from 1998 to 2007, 5.4 million Congolese have died, with a rate of 45,000 Congolese dying every month. That's an outdated figure. So we don't even know how many people are dying. But what is the conflict about? Two of U.S. allies, Rwanda and Uganda, have invaded the Congo twice, in 1996 and 1998. And up until today, they continue to support proxy rebel militias. But why is another African country, why are two African nations in the DRC? Very simple. They are there for land and resources. They've been able to get access to Congo's mineral resources that's needed for modern day technology. And they've done so while being documented, right? With numerous reports, be it Human Rights Watch, be it UN Group of Experts report. The documentation is already existent, that even the UN High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva stated that what's happening in the Congo are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in a competent court, just as we've seen with the case of South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ. Congolese right now have a document that already show that, right? The UN mapping exercise report. That's the document I'm referring to. But toward these close to 20 years of conflict, there have been African nations who have played a constructive role. mostly nations in the SADC, the Southern African Development Community. South Africa is a member of SADC. In the Second Congo War that started in 1998, South Africa actually played a role in the peace negotiation that was under Thabo Mbeki presidency. And all throughout, up until 2012, South Africa has always been at the side of the Congolese when it comes to military actions because they've been clear about the invasions of the Congo. People may now remember that in the 1997, during the Congo invasions of Rwanda and Uganda, it was Mandela who actually negotiated some form of peace deal between the rebels of the Congo and the Rwanda-Uganda forces who were with Laurent Désiré Kabila. This took place on the military boat, the South African military boat called Utenika. Fast forward to 2012, when the M23, that today, as I say, we are calling them the M23, I'm clear that that's not their name. No, they've been in the Congo since 1996. In 96, they were called AFDL. In the 2000, they were called RCD. Around 2009, they changed their name from RCD to CNDP. And in 2012, they became M23. They called themselves M23. So this is a Rwanda proxy rebel militia. In 2012, Congo called for SADC nation to come in support of the DRC military during the M23 uprising. That's when most of the South African soldiers came in. So you had Tanzanian soldiers, they came in. You had South African soldiers also, and also Malawi. These soldiers came in a military brigade that we call FIB, Force Intervention Brigade. And the military actions on the ground was actually successful at pushing back the M23, and they pushed them back where in 2013, the M23 ceased conflict, put out a statement that they were no longer going to fight. A decade later, they are back. Now, the Congolese government signed an agreement with the East African Community Bloc, the EAC, East African Community, as Congo joined the EAC as a member. EAC troops came to the DRC. You had Kenyan troops there. You had troops from Burundi. You also had Rwandan and Ugandan, right? The perpetrator of the violence were part of that force. So it was already clear that that solution was not going to stop the M23, which started its uprising again around 2021, 2022, right? And the Congolese government, a few months ago, asked the EAC forces to leave DRC because they felt that the East African forces are not engaging at stopping the M23 rebels. So the Congolese government has now officially asked again the SADC forces to intervene. And it was voted in the SADC meeting that there should be a deployment, and South Africa has pledged 2,900 soldiers to come into DRC as a supplement to already soldiers who are already in DRC at the moment as part of the Force Intervention Brigade. Unfortunately, today, it was announced that a bomb was dropped into one of their military bases in Goma, killing 2 South African soldiers and wounding 3. But of course, it's horrific. Let's not forget, that's not the only bomb that have been dropped in the city of Goma for the past 2 weeks, right? There have been at least 4 bombs in the city of Goma dropped, killing also Congolese civilians. And this is an attempt of the M23 in taking over the city of Goma, a city of 2 million, an estimated 2 million people. And they've been launching these attacks. And for the M23, as I said before, it will be important to not call them M23 because they have sophisticated weapons. We know who they are. They are Rwandan proxy. They are backed by the Rwandan Defense Force. That even Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General himself, stated in an interview that he gave with a news channel, France 24, Guterres stated that the UN forces can't fight the M23 forces, and asked why. And his response was, because the M23 uses sophisticated weapons. They have better weapons than UN forces. So how does the M23 get its weapon, right? when we look at UN group of experts report, they're saying to us that the M23 have helmet manufactured in 2021. And it has a lot number, right, that can be tracked of where these weapons are coming from. They have night vision goggle. And lately, they actually have anti-drone missiles, right? Congo purchased 3 Chinese drones, right, the CH-4 drones. Right now, only one of them works. Why? Because one of the Chinese drones was taken down by the M23 rebels. Do you just go to, sorry to do a small promotion for them, but do you go to Walmart and buy a anti-drone missile? No, right?
No.
Countries that have anti-drone missiles, anti-drone equipment, very often receive it from Western nations into the military aid. So we do know that Rwanda receives military aid from the European Union. They also receive military aid from the United States and the United Kingdom. And as of this week, as it was reported on military, in a military news magazine online, Rwanda has just purchased from Poland, right, an anti-drone radar. A week after the Polish president left Rwanda, he was in Rwanda last week, and it's being announced, right, after the president of Poland leaving Kigali, that Rwanda has acquired an anti-drone radar. Is it for Rwanda security? That's what the magazine is saying. But we know what is happening, right? That the Chinese drones have been very effective at stopping the M23 advances, and that the M23 need much more military support. No one will hold Poland accountable for selling a weapon to Rwanda when even the United States said that the evidence of Rwanda supporting rebel groups is credible. No one is going to hold the European Union for providing $20 million of military aid to Rwanda, knowing also, according to their own statement, that Rwanda is supporting rebel groups in DRC. And no one is going to hold the UK accountable for continuing to support militarily Rwanda. But not only that, using Rwanda as a space where they will take migrants from the UK to be processed in Kigali in exchange of 150 million pounds that they will give the Rwandan government.
Wow. Well, a lot of different threads there, but you laid it out perfectly. Very interesting. We're going to continue to keep covering this and following this because obviously it's a fast-moving situation. But as always, Kambale Musavuli, an analyst with the Center for Research in the Congo, Kinshasa, thanks for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Okay. Thank you always.
Mm-hmm. It's always great to hear from Kambale. You know, last time I saw Kambale was I saw him in D.C., last month when I was there at the massive protest for Palestine.
Well, as he's pointed out on our show before, a lot of solidarity between popular movements in Congo and Palestine. You know, Birzeit University always doing Congo Week. I mean, there's multiple different links there that people aren't seeing. And, you know, obviously I think people are correct to keep, you know, asking folks to keep focusing on the Congo as they should, but there's no need to, you know, have a competition here. We can talk about Congo, Sudan, Palestine, and all of them and not lose anything in any of those struggles and, in fact, only make them stronger. So, no, great segment and really interesting to see how the popular movement there is growing. And the other thing, too, is during AFCON, the African Cup of Nations, there was another, you know, fantastic campaign driven by Congolese people to draw attention to what was happening there. Anyway, it's another story for another time. You know, Rania, obviously one of the other major issues that is right in front of us in terms of world events now, obviously, is this, you know, potential ground invasion by the Israelis into Rafah and the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Obviously, I think for those who have been watching, they've been bombing the area very heavily now for some time. There's a lot of sort of back and forth over exactly what's going to happen when, but it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu has, you know, confirmed that they are going to attempt to get into Rafah, and obviously that will be very, very, it's already very, very bloody. I mean, the genocide will continue, I guess you could say. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand have actually, I believe, come out and now called for a ceasefire. because of this. I think Canada maybe already had called for one. But nonetheless, I mean, you can see that, even those who have been very supportive of Israel are getting a little bit of cold feet about this one, because the level of there's nowhere left to run to now. The Israelis are claiming people can this is what Netanyahu said on, I think it was on the ABC Sunday show, but on one of them, they can go back to the areas further north that the Israelis have quote unquote cleared. I think obviously we know that a lot of what I believe that they're trying to do and hoping to do is to try to push people out of the Gaza Strip. How exactly that would play, who knows? But nonetheless, whatever the exact elements of it, from the bombing alone of Rafah, I think we've seen that this is, yet another escalation of this just deplorable conduct that's taking place by the Israelis, just massive terrorism happening here in the Gaza Strip. But, nonetheless, Rania, I think maybe the thing that is sitting with me the most is how, the Biden administration talking about how, they're all about morality or whatever. They're trying to push them behind the scenes. They've been saying that since October 9th. We've been pushing them behind the scenes not to do this, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. So it's sort of a non sequitur, but I feel like the U.S. complicity in what's happening is just it was bad the whole way through, but it feels like to me it's even more pronounced because they've forced us to, listen to these stupid statements they're making about how they're trying to help people while the situation continues to escalate and they continue to send weapons and, moral support.
I mean, yeah, not just send weapons. You had this vote in the Senate. It was 66-33 was the ultimate outcome from earlier this week. And that was 66-33 voting, not just to give Israel more money, more weapons, make it easier for Biden to send weapons to Israel without even having to come to Congress, but also reinforcing the ban on UNRWA funding. So literally enforcing a ban on food and water, and basically to the people that they're sending Israel to bomb. And there's so many different angles to this. It's like your head spins trying to figure out like which part to think about first, because the situation in Rafah is apocalyptic. It is, the scenes that we're seeing aren't even like a full representation of how bad it is. You just see tent after tent after tent. And by tent, I just mean sheets. People are sheltering from the elements with sheets. And the weather there is probably similar to the weather I'm experiencing here in Beirut right now. So it's cold and it's raining a lot. It gets really cold at night. You're basically sleeping outside with hopefully a sheet covering you from when it rains. Cold every single night. And then you wake up in the morning and your life is to search for water and to search for food so that you and your family don't die of thirst and starvation that day. And it's just like you see people crawling around literally on camp. Like there's video footage of people crawling in trash bins looking for spare food to eat. Mm-hmm. There's no bathrooms to use. It's been like this for months, by the way. Like we've talked about this on the show. This is months of this. This isn't just a few weeks. This is now well into 5 months of this situation at the same time dodging bombs. Mm-hmm. And now the Israelis are saying, oh, we're going to bomb. They're bombing Rafah. They're invading various parts of it. They're raiding hospitals. Everything they basically did across the north of the Gaza Strip, the center of the Gaza Strip, they're now beginning to do in Rafah. And there is literally nowhere else for people to go. People are being sniped to death, by the way, if they do try to return to the north. So that's another lie of Netanyahu's. Mm-hmm. And then we're just like being gaslit constantly by this sociopathic administration in the US that has these spokespeople get up on podiums every day and tell us that they're doing everything they can to protect the people they are actively killing. It is insane. It is. This is like, I don't know what other words to use. The word Holocaust comes to mind. The images I'm seeing, it really killed me. I saw this one video of these like young boys at the border with Egypt, and they were like talking to or yelling, shouting at these Egyptian soldiers they saw on the other side, and basically saying, okay, if you're not going to let us leave, can you at least give us your guns so we can like fight back? It's just so devastating. And it's why, it's just, I don't know. I continue to be, it's like a sense of bewilderment at how there are still people watching this happen
Yeah.
and saying, yeah, but Hamas, yeah, but they deserve it. Yeah, but they use human shields. It's just the genocidal drive towards Palestinians is so extreme and so insane. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then there's the last factor I'll mention, Eugene, is
Mm-hmm.
the potential ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. It stands to be seen what the Egyptian government's going to ultimately do, but that would be a huge red line for a group like Hezbollah. So, that's another way this is playing with fire. Obviously, things have been escalating gradually between Lebanon and Israel, but they've still stayed at like a simmer compared to the potential of what could actually happen.
Yeah.
So that could blow up too if the Israelis cross that red line.
No, I think it's a good point, and there's the ongoing attacks on the Al Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, which I believe is actually now tanks are in there, and they've forced all these people to leave, and so the war on hospitals, of course, is continuing. We're now just getting more and more information about the just like total inhumanity that people who are being kidnapped in these mass raids where they're kidnapping and detaining people, just the worst possible sort of dehumanizing treatment that can possibly be conceived of being put on people. I mean, you've got, certainly it seems pretty clear now, especially if you include those who are likely trapped under the rubble, that were over 100,000 people killed or wounded, which is a just stunning statistic. And you can see there on my left, some of those images are of some of those mass raids, and these are like not listen, I don't know anything about anything, but from what we've seen in terms of the reporting, it seems pretty clear that most of these people are not just regular people, but anyone of a certain military age. And, it's funny, the military age male, which I know you'll remember this well, Rania, this was the whole issue with the drone strikes of the U.S. and Afghanistan. It was just if you were between 15 and 60 or something, and they saw you on a camera and a group of 5 people, they could just launch a drone strike against you. They didn't have to know anything other than you were just standing around. And we saw the recent drone strike that was done on those 3 Palestinians who were just starting a motorcycle. A guy trying to kickstart a motorcycle and his 2 friends kind of pushing him to get the thing going, and they just, took a shot at him. Who knows what they were doing? And it just, you can see the level of, just total psyops that are happening here, where they're trying to reduce the impact of the toll of what's happening by trying to make it seem as if some significant subset of people are, and the same thing with the UNRWA thing, like, well, 12 of them knew something about Hamas, something, to create this perception that this isn't a mass slaughter of mainly civilians. And, not that it really is justified, because obviously the Palestinian people have the right to resist. So the idea that somehow it's like more or less justified, but from the point of view of the popular imagination, you know what I'm saying? The idea of killing civilians, of course, being something that people are rightfully, very, very distressed by, I think is, yet again, you can see these attempts to try to find a way to, reduce the impact of it, and all these attempts to just distract from it. I mean, that's what I am constantly telling people. Like the whole issue of like, is there a tunnel under this? Are they doing that? Are they doing this? What happened on October 7th? Honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, this is the whole point, that this is not random. This is deliberate. The Israelis are hoping by creating a whole series of random crises around their lives that they can keep people from focusing on the real issue, which is that they're conducting this genocidal assault on the Gaza Strip day in and day out that is sparing no one no matter what, and that they know every single thing about it, which we know from reporting from 972 magazine, that every single strike, they know what they're doing, how many people they're likely killing, and that most of them aren't actually involved in anything whatsoever. So, you have to create all these little side controversies to keep people from continually focusing in on that. And I think that's a lot of what we see with these various sort of things that are cropping up about what really happened, where, when, and why, and a lot of these things is to distract people. The whole, there's a Hamas base under that. It's to get people talking for a week about whether or not Al-Shifa Hospital is a Hamas base, and not the fact that clearly people who are in a hospital who are injured individuals are being starved out, shot, sniped, all these different things in a way that I think most people would find negative. So I think that's another aspect of this, is the deep sort of psyop intelligence age element to this that is really, aggressively trying to draw attention away from what's happening.
Yeah, that's what the Israelis excel at, right? It's all about distracting. I mean, at this point, people have probably forgotten about it, but remember the first hospital they bombed was Al Ahli Hospital, and everybody spent 2 weeks talking about whether or not it was Islamic Jihad that did it, because the Israelis said so, right?
Right.
Then it became suddenly, and now bombing hospitals is totally normal. Israel's like gone to war against every single hospital in Gaza because apparently Hamas, like that's the only place they put their headquarters. Well, no, that's not true. Hamas puts his headquarters wherever Israel bombs, which is all of Gaza. All of Gaza is just one big Hamas headquarters. And we're all just supposed to believe that. At one point, I think it was like, you know what? You might as well just say that every single Palestinian has Hamas, like has Hamas terror tunnel inside of their veins, because it's the only thing that explains all of them being killable. I mean, it's just completely insane. And, I really do believe that there's a special place down below for Matt Miller and John Kirby. I mean, these people, I don't know, like, if they're like actually sociopaths or what it is, like how much are they being, there's not enough money that you could pay me to get up on a podium every single day and justify a genocide the way these two have. It's disgusting.
Amazingly, John Kirby actually said that Israel was better than the American military. I mean,
it's like he's just a wind-up. It's like a wind-up lawyer for Israel or something. Like, it's just insane. And he's like a crisis actor too, because he can cry on demand when it's about Ukrainians. But when it's about Palestinians, it's like, no, like you don't get to be human, and I will justify literally every single atrocity against you. And the same, Matt Miller does it a little differently. He kind of smirks when he knows he's about to go viral. Like, you can tell in the, he knows he's like, when he's about answering a question, he's like, this is going to go viral. Yeah. But it's like, at this point, it's like, I used to kind of enjoy, it used to be a little bit cathartic watching reporters ask them the tough questions, but you know exactly what they're going to say. They say the same script every time. There's not even any point in asking anymore. At this point, there's been a line drawn in the sand. There is a line, and you are either for genocide or against it. It is that simple. It's 5 months into this. If you are still confused, like the only people who are still confused are people who either just started paying attention or people who are racist, frankly, because you have to be racist to support this on any level whatsoever. I don't care how much you hate Hamas. I don't care how much you think October 7th was such a horrible atrocity. If you think anything justifies this, something is deeply wrong with you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because it doesn't even conform to like the most basic principles of proportionate response. You know what I mean? Like, again, I think people know our position. They certainly know my position as a person on this issue. I don't think that any of this is justified because it's a totally unjustifiable apartheid, settler colonial project. Exactly. But let's just say you were looking at it from the point of view of like, well, maybe both sides have a point. Okay, well then if you're claiming, Israel, and we can't even fully believe this number, that 1,200 people died on October 7th, you'd think that when 1,200 people died on the other side, that's sort of like the eye for an eye kind of Hammurabi's code, type of orientation. But now you're killing 30-some thousand people. I mean, this is ridiculous. Anybody who somehow thinks this is proportionate is just insane. But, the thing is, and I think this is the important element here, and then we'll close on this, to the point you're making, Rania, about how it's totally unjustifiable, is it speaks yet again to the fact that this is a settler colonial project, because this is exactly what they said in Vietnam. All the Vietnamese, they're all quote unquote Viet Cong. The kids, all of them. So we got to kill everybody. They're everywhere. You never know. You just got to bomb them all. The French about Algeria, they're all out here killing us. They're all guerrillas. They're all supporters of the National Liberation Front. We got to kill them all. The Native Americans, well, we got to kill them all because you can't trust them. You can't trust any of them. I mean, you know what they used to say in the Old West? The only good Indian is a dead Indian, right? So the idea is they're all complicit. They're all there. These settler colonial projects always do this. And in the past, when we're talking about indigenous people, when we're talking about Algeria, when we're talking about Vietnam, when we're talking about Malaysia, the Malay emergency, look at how many Malays were killed by the British in the 1960s there. If you want to learn more, people say that was so terrible. They never should have done that. What an evil, horrible thing. So if you believe that about all these other situations, you have to apply the same logic here. Israel, just like every other occupying power that's trying to ethnically cleanse a land in order to control it and to do whatever they want to do, is creating this completely fake narrative to dehumanize Palestinians, to facilitate this genocide. And anyone who is on the side of that, you are so far on the wrong side of history, I don't even know what to tell you. So I think it's a very good point you made there, Rania. There's no, at this point, come on. Like, even if you try to justify it, you can't. So we will obviously, go ahead.
Eugene, I just want to throw one more thing. This is a live stream genocide. Like, you can't even you can't even claim to not really know what's happening, because
Yeah.
all you have to do is open your phone and see what's happening. It's being live streamed.
Yeah.
Both sides are
Yeah.
live streaming it, by the way, and one side is actually celebrating the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
So that's who you choose to align yourself with, is egomaniacal psychos who are consumed by hate and just cruelty. Then go right ahead, be on the side of the genocidaires. But you have, like I said, you have, chosen the side you want to be on in history, and the world will look back on this moment and they will see who sided with the Nazis and who sided with the people being murdered.
Just
and
real
it's
quick,
very simple to me.
UNRWA just reporting that 17,000 children in Gaza have been separated from their parents. 17,000 children, and I'm sure that includes.
Imagine
deaths and people who
justifying
just
that.
lost.
Imagine justifying that. Imagine justifying orphans. And these aren't children who were just like, they were at a concert and like that. That's like scary enough when you like everybody has a memory
Yeah,
from
if
when
you
they're
lose
a
a kid in
kid
the
of
mall
like
or something
when
like
they
that.
were
Yeah.
grocery store or the mall, and it's like really traumatic. Even like you remember that and you're like, oh, I was really scared. This is in the worst circumstances imaginable. These are people who have lost their parents because they survived a bombing of their building and spent maybe like a day in the rubble thinking they were going to die too.
Yeah.
Like, these are people who lost their siblings. These are people whose families died the worst deaths imaginable, suffocating under rubble. Like, it's just unfathomable the trauma that people are going to come out of when this is eventually over, if they end up surviving. Just yesterday in Lebanon, there was the Israelis hit a building in Nabatieh in southern Lebanon, and they killed an entire family. And one of the kids in that family, this little boy, survived. And there's now this iconic image of him being pulled out of the rubble. He's like in his pajamas, clearly like had been tucked into bed before this building was bombed. And you just think to yourself, this kid is now an orphan. What is the rest of his life going to be like? And how does he get over that trauma? And he looked so terrified because he thought he was going to die too. And now his entire family's gone. And there's so many kids like that in Gaza. And now more and more of them across Lebanon. And it's just like the destruction of an entire generation of children.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we're going to switch gears here to another story that is, well, it's actually not capturing any headlines, despite the fact that it really should. And that is the reauthorization of a lot of the NSA spying programs that we have all come to learn a lot about, especially thanks to Edward Snowden and his releases there. And to talk more about this, we are very, very honored to be joined once again by Kevin Gostelow, who is the curator of the Dissenter.org newsletter and also the co-host of the podcast Unauthorized Disclosure. Kevin, as always, thanks so much for being back with us.
Hey, good to talk with both of you again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, here we are yet again, the Section 702 reauthorization coming up in Congress, not getting a lot of news as much as it should probably here in the U.S. press. And, I find people are often, and this is maybe part of the issue, somewhat confused about these programs, don't know everything about it. So just quickly, if you could, give us an encapsulation of Section 702 and why this is such a crucial thing to follow.
Certainly. So 702 is actually a program that is now favored by the national security state because of the fact that there were modest reforms that were passed after Edward Snowden exposed all of these mass surveillance programs that were at the fingertips of intelligence agencies to do global surveillance, to do, even domestic surveillance. And you might recall that there was something that allowed for bulk email collections. It was called Section 215, and that ended up being reined in. So they just jumped over to this other program. They call it Section 702 now. It's another part of this FISA Amendments Act that was passed in 2008. That's something that President Barack Obama, before he was president, actually voted for, and it was a big deal because he had been on the campaign trail talking about how he was against Bush-era abuses of power when it came to surveillance, but yet he voted for this. And thrown in there, I think there was retroactive immunity that ended up being granted to the different telecommunications companies that were involved in warrantless wiretapping after the September 11th attacks. It's all important history because for the last 25 years, people who care about privacy and civil liberties have been playing this struggle, have been working this struggle to try and get these security agencies to quit abusing people and quit engaging in these like massive surveillance programs that violate the rights and are also used to target activists. If you'll give me just a moment, I'd like to read you this list of exactly who has been violated as a result of this program. This comes from the Brennan Center for Justice, but I have this here just because, I mean, rather than try to memorize it and give it to you, why don't I just give you the list very clearly? There were searches for 141 racial justice protesters. By the way, the FBI is the one that's abusing this, I believe. There were political activist groups that were involved in organizing protests that were searched for. There were searches for 2 men of, quote, Middle Eastern descent who were loading cleaning supplies into a truck. Searches for mosques that were intentionally mislabeled to avoid any oversight. So do it in a way so people can't tell that we're looking at mosques. Searches for Professor Xiaozing Zi, an American academic who was wrongly accused of unlawfully sharing sensitive technology with scientists in China. Searches for a state court judge who reported civil rights violations to the FBI. So, hey, you know, why don't we do an investigation into the person who says we're not acting properly? Searches for immigrants, even with no indication they pose a risk to national security. Batch, so this is important, batch searches can be done. Batch means that like you're just grabbing thousands upon thousands at one time. Searches that included current and former federal government officials, journalists, political commentators, and 19,000 donors to a congressional campaign. So now we're doing surveillance of political donors to a political campaign. Searches for a sitting congressman, a U.S. senator, and a state senator. And then the last one here is that there were searches for a local political party at one point in the United States. That's not what this is sold to Americans as a tool for. It's supposed to be for keeping us all safe from terrorism. But we know that that has actually never proven to be true, that any of these programs have prevented any terrorist attacks. I went back before the show and looked, and one of the things they tried to claim after Edward Snowden exposed the program where our phone call records were being kept, they said that like 54 terrorism plots had been thwarted. But when you whittled it down, it was pretty easy to find out that that was a complete and total lie.
You know, Kevin, I'm curious. There was a time when it was a politically popular topic, everything that you just talked about. But it's kind of, I think over the years, faded into the background a bit. I'm not really sure why. It's just not as popularly discussed. It doesn't get that much media coverage anymore. It's kind of like, you know, just been accepted. They warrantless wiretapping is a thing. We just accept it and deal with it. So I'm just curious, politically speaking, is there anyone in a position of power this is still their issue, that's advocating against this? I imagine Joe Biden is not one of those people. But are there people in Congress who are pushing against this?
Yeah, so before we did this broadcast today, there was drama in Congress around 702 reauthorization. And actually, the reason why we're not talking about a vote right now on this show, because it was scheduled to come up for a vote, is because the House Intelligence Committee people had it yanked from the floor so they couldn't vote on it, had Speaker Mike Johnson remove it because they were afraid they were going to lose. The House Judiciary Committee has Republicans that are privacy-minded, libertarian-leaning, so to speak, and they care about this civil liberties issue to the point that they passed a version of reauthorization with a warrant requirement. So if the FBI or any of these agencies wanted to do a search, they would have to go get a warrant in order to do it. The intelligence community does not like that. And so they were afraid they were going to lose the vote and ended up getting it yanked. And now we're hearing that they're likely to shove this into a big, massive spending bill so that if Republicans who want to protect civil liberties vote against that spending bill, they're going to be shutting the government down and then they're going to look terrible. This is a ploy. And it's sad in my opinion, that I can't point to progressive Democrats or anyone leaning left who is making a big deal out of it. It really does come down to, it would seem, these Republicans that are more aligned with even Donald Trump, who are the ones that have taken up this issue of mass surveillance. So for left-leaning people who care about privacy, who care about this, because in order to organize and engage in activism, we can't have everybody out there on the streets being targeted by the national security state. People who understand their history of COINTELPRO shouldn't be vesting the FBI with this kind of authority. But there had been this morphing in the last 4 to 6 years where people turned into supporters of the FBI because it turned its attention to Donald Trump.
You know, Kevin, and I'm glad you mentioned that one as well, because it seems like to me this also really reinforces the importance of, you know, not only whistleblowers as a concept, but things like the case of Julian Assange that's still before us, because, you know, quite frankly, we probably can't really depend on those in a position of power to reveal a lot of these things. And it's because of those who have taken great risks that we even know a lot of the little bit that we do know. I know Mr. Assange is continuing to face extradition here to the United States. I think there's some things coming up next week. Where does that case stand?
Yeah, so next week there's a major appeal hearing on February 20th and 21st. It's his first chance to ask an appeals court for a wider hearing. If he loses, he has no more avenues in the legal system in the UK. It's believed that this could be his last best hope for avoiding extradition to the United States. There should be an opportunity to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights if he loses at this level. But supporters, press freedom advocates have dubbed February 20th Day X because it is that significant. It really could be the point in which the U.S. wins, finally, as they have hoped, and are able to put Julian Assange on a plane before the year is over, so that he could be on trial in Alexandria, Virginia for journalism. And that's something that everyone's chewing over. And the fact that President Joe Biden and his Justice Department and Attorney General Merrick Garland are willing to go through with it is stunning. But like a lot of what we've been seeing as you were discussing the events in Gaza, we're seeing how far this administration is willing to go in just laughing and not taking any of the principles or values they claim seriously. They're so brazen in the way that they exercise power right now. And I think because they believe they can get away with it, they would bring Julian Assange to the US and put him on trial. Because, you know, as we're talking about surveillance, or you're talking about Assange, these are things that exist in some kind of universe where they believe nobody's going to hold them accountable. Nobody's going to stop them. So why not? Let's do it, because there are people who want to put him on trial. The CIA wants to put him on trial because they're upset that they were the victim to one of the largest leaks in the history of their agency in 2017 when CIA hacking materials were published. Well, they just got the leaker sentenced to 33 years in prison. His name's Joshua Schulte. So now let's make sure that we follow through with this and complete the job and get Julian Assange in and make sure that he is convicted. And so there's nothing stopping him, even though Australia in the parliament, they just voted to say that their government supports dropping the charges against Julian Assange because he's one of their own. He's an Australian citizen. And so I don't know. It doesn't really look good for Julian Assange, but there's never been more support for Julian Assange to end the case. So that does make me feel a little bit more hopeful, because 35 plus law professors were just organized by Freedom of the Press Foundation to send a message to Attorney General Merrick Garland to let the Justice Department know that this needs to end. There's all kinds of little blips like this that show that time is running out for the US government to continue this and still have people's support. But Julian Assange is 52 years old. He's been in some form of arbitrary detention for the last 10 to 15 years. His health is deteriorating. 2 or 3 years ago, he had a mini stroke. How does this end? It could end with him dying in Belmarsh prison in London, where he is being held right now. And so I think they figure that if they can just keep dragging this on and on and on, it doesn't matter, because at some point he's probably not going to be alive anymore. So they could put him on trial, or they could just let him die in prison. And that's what everyone organizing is trying to avoid an outcome where he's either put on trial or dies in prison.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, real quick before we let you go, you've been dogged on this beat for some time now. Where can folks find your work?
If you go to thedissenter.org, you can find my work there. I'm doing a Countdown to Day X series right now that gives everybody a breakdown on what to expect with the appeal hearing next week. So thank you both.
No, of course. Thank you.
I mean, it really is like the political assassination in slow motion. And and just continuing Trump's policy, because as Kevin always points out, Obama wasn't pursuing this for a reason. So, I mean, you expect nothing less, though, from a Biden administration that's willing to commit genocide.
No, I agree.
Why not also, assassinate a journalist?
Indeed. Well, we are going to keep moving the show forward here. We want to turn back to Palestine and a fantastic new novel that I just cannot recommend any higher, The Trinity of Fundamentals. You can get it at 1804books.com. That's 1804books.com. Trinity of Fundamentals. Check it out. We want to talk about it here, of course. It's by Wissam Rafidi, by the way. But we are very, very honored to have here to discuss the text Mohammed Nabulsi, who is an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you. I almost don't even know where to start. I've been reading the book. It's so rich. There's so much to it. So people, again, you just have to buy it and read it. But I guess maybe the first thing I'll ask you is, obviously in the midst of everything we're seeing, the genocide that's happening right now, I think, making time to read might seem to some people to be, are we using our time well, especially a novel? Why is this novel so important in this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question.
At the top of the hour. You know what? Let me just plug in my battery now, just in case we end up going past that time. Just be on the safe side. 1 second.
And go.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Apologies there on behalf of our whole team. Had a few technical difficulties there. Just for folks who are watching before, I just want to let folks know Mohammed Nabulsi from the Palestinian Youth Movement, who was with us, didn't have enough time, I thought, to really do justice to this great new text, Trinity of Fundamentals, that you can get in 1804books.com. We're going to reschedule him. We're going to do that again. We're going to talk about the book, but excuse me. Excuse me.
Bless
please, thank you, Rania. Please just buy the book, read the book, and then you'll be even better prepared for our next conversation about it again. Trinity of Fundamentals, 1804books.com. Could not recommend it more higher. And again, apologies there for the technical difficulties. We're just going to move on with the show. We're going to move to another issue that is NATO and many things surrounding it. And for this conversation, we are very honored to be joined once again by Dr. Vijay Prashad, who is the executive director of the Tricontinental Institute. Vijay, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Well, a pleasure to have you here as always. And, it's interesting because, of course, President Donald Trump made worldwide news by saying that if he was president again, he would encourage Russia to, do whatever the hell they wanted to any NATO member that did not, spend enough money on their military, according to Trump. But the bigger question here, Vijay, that a lot of people are talking about and the freak out that's happening in D.C. is he's questioning NATO. He's questioning our alliances. And I guess it just begs the question, do we really need NATO? Even if the messenger isn't right, is this a conversation we need to start having?
Well, it's firstly great to be with you guys again. I think Trump's comments are completely being misread. Trump didn't say that NATO is unnecessary. This is not an attack by Trump on NATO. I think there's a way when Trump speaks, people just read whatever they want into his statements. In fact, what Trump is saying is something worse than close down NATO. What Trump is saying is he's saying that European countries need to spend more in their defense. There was an agreement reached a few years ago that European countries would spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. Trump, even when he was president last time, traveled around the European continent, met with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, and pretty bluntly said, if you guys don't spend 2%, we're not defending you. He's just repeating the same thing. He's trying to get the Europeans to put more money into defense. This is not actually an attack on NATO. It's an attempt to get European countries to spend more on defense. Take the case of Germany. Germany has a serious problem. After the conflict began 2 years ago in Ukraine, after Russian troops entered Ukraine, Germany passed an emergency fund which allowed them to lift their military spending so that they could send Leopard tanks to Ukraine, send other heavy artillery into Ukraine, and so on. They essentially donated it to the Ukrainian forces. So they plugged the hole by putting in this emergency fund. This emergency fund is going to run out. Germany has a problem. They have what is known as the debt brake. So they can't actually go into debt to finance government spending. They also don't have the appetite, despite the fact that it's a so-called social democratic-led government. They don't have the appetite to raise taxes. So if they're going to maintain 2% military spending, they're going to have to slash welfare payments. They're going to have to slash social wages. They're going to have to slash, the democratic spending that they have in their society. All of that is going to have to be cut. What Trump is basically saying to Olaf Scholz, who is a pretty mild, milquetoast kind of leader of the German state, what he's saying to people like Scholz is, buck up. You're going to have to slash spending for the people. You're going to increase austerity because you have to move more money to the military side of things. That's what Trump is saying. This is not an attack on NATO. In fact, as I said, it's worse than that. It's trying to strengthen European military defense, which would in turn strengthen NATO. NATO is an obsolete military alliance that is, in fact, trying to raise the temperature, not only along the flank of the border between what used to be called Western Europe and Eastern Europe, particularly with Russia, but also NATO is involved in itself in the destruction of Libya. That's not in Europe. That's on the African continent. NATO has involved itself in the occupation of Afghanistan for 20 years. There is now talk of an Asian NATO to challenge. It is effectively a war-making, destructive machine that needs to be shut down. But let's not misunderstand anything. Mr. Trump is not saying close down NATO. In fact, Mr. Trump is saying put more money into European defense. That's even worse. And I don't understand how anybody can listen to Trump and say, well, he's saying get rid of NATO. Is that a good thing? Certainly not what he's saying.
Oh, you're muted, Rania.
Of course I'm muted, because why not? It sounds to me, Vijay, like what you're trying to say is that NATO is a humanitarian organization that should continue to be supported by all of the civilized countries. No, I mean, it's when you look at the record of NATO, there's no denying that it has done nothing but destroy, destroy, destroy. I've had you come on Dispatches a few times and talk about NATO in the context of both the, you shed some light on NATO in Africa, which I don't think people are familiar with the NATO's role in Africa. You should go watch that episode if you're not, as well as NATO's role in the new Cold War, not just with Russia, but also with China, like the expansion of NATO to include China. And so it seems to me that this reaction to Donald Trump, we saw it a lot when Donald Trump was president. Everybody would cry about it. About, oh my God, he wants to defund NATO. Oh my God, he doesn't want to be with our allies, even though he kind of just continued, everything as usual. But I guess the question becomes beyond Ukraine, because a lot of people only understand NATO now in the context of Ukraine. But there's so much more destructive capacity for this organization. It really is an organization, a military cooperation of the imperialist countries. So what should people be concerned about with NATO beyond Ukraine?
See, NATO was created in 1949. The express purpose was the so-called defense of Europe. In fact, it was a platform that allowed US power to maintain its authority in formerly independent European countries, so that US bases in Germany and in Italy, bases set up basically in the aftermath of World War II, could have a permanence there. And in fact, there are still US bases in Germany and Italy. NATO effectively became the instrument of the permanent military establishment by the United States on the European continent. That's what NATO was. Well, NATO was not alone. In the 1950s, United States created the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, the so-called Manila Pact. They created the Central Treaty Organization, the so-called Baghdad Pact. Well, these pacts have disappeared. There's no more SEATO. There's no more CENTO. So NATO, this parochial organization supposedly set up to defend Europe, has now taken on this role of global NATO. In the absence of a CENTO, in the absence of SEATO, NATO intellectuals of NATO like Ivo Dalder and others have 20 years ago started talking about the role of global NATO, NATO having a global footprint. Now, again, some of this is a little disingenuous, for somebody like Ivo Dalder to write and say there needs to be global NATO. Just a second. There's always been a kind of global NATO. United States has bases in Japan, has bases in Philippines, has bases in Southeast Asia, bases all over the world. And because the United States effectively runs NATO command, it has access to the intelligence of the NATO countries. What was called the Five Eyes Intelligence Network. Now the 14 Eyes Intelligence Network includes basically all the NATO countries. If you put together US military spending, which is gargantuan, and you have to recognize that the Financial Times just a few weeks ago celebrated the rise in military spending, saying this is good for business. I mean, so vulgar at a time when there's a genocidal war against the Palestinians in Gaza, for the business press to say so openly and vulgarly that it's good that military spending is increasing is extraordinary. So, on the one side, the United States, through the Five Eyes, now 14 Eyes Intelligence Network, its military allies, we calculated the amount of military spending by these countries. 3/4 of global military spending is done by NATO countries, the NATO allies, including, say, South Korea, Japan, and so on. The United States, by far, in the lead of military spending, by far, but still through these allies. So there's always, in a sense, been a kind of global NATO. They want to formalize it. They talked about an Asian NATO. And I was very interested to listen to the Indian foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar. It's a right-wing government, a far right-wing government in India. Mr. Jaishankar was asked, would India join Asian NATO, or would India join NATO plus, a kind of the sort of children's table of NATO, which would include Japan and so on. And Mr. Jaishankar answered the interviewer saying, look, we are against the NATO mindset. I thought that was really interesting. We are against the NATO mindset. Well, let's back up, Rania. What's the NATO mindset? Effectively, and I think just trying to interpret what Mr. Jaishankar said, the NATO mindset is we have the right to use military force anywhere in the world at any point to do anything we want. By the way, that's a paraphrase of George W. Bush, used to be the president of the United States, who said after 9/11, we will attack anybody at any time, anywhere. And that's the NATO mindset. We will attack anybody, anytime, anywhere, including recklessly. We will challenge China. Now, China only has 12% of the world's share of military spending. It's effectively a defensive power. China is not going to come and assault the United States. There's going to be no attack on US shipping in the Pacific and so on. But China has the capacity to defend itself. So it's kind of madness, this NATO mindset. I think that's what Jaishankar was talking about. It is literally madness. And I don't want to be rude. I don't want to accuse Lloyd Austin of a bout of madness. But there is a madness in the NATO mindset. They want to weaken Russia. Russia is a major nuclear power. It's a major power in Eurasia. You can't weaken Russia. You can't weaken China. It's just not possible. I don't know what they're thinking. There is a madness in their thought process. And I found it interesting, by the way, in the middle of all this, that Mr. Putin, in fact, comes on the side of Biden this time, not Trump. So I'm sure that confuses all the Democrats who have a kind of allergic reaction to Donald Trump and say, well, now Putin has in fact endorsed Biden. What does this mean? Will they continue to want to weaken Russia? An impossible, dangerous, mad strategy.
Well, and I also just want to note here in terms of military spending by various countries, the excellent new publication Hyper-Imperialism from Tricontinental lays this out very well in both word and great graphic representations. And, you know, I always wonder about these things in terms of what the impact is going to be in some of these countries, you know, that are pushing so, aggressively for the expansion of NATO. And I wonder if you are at all hopeful that things like, say, the emergence of the BSW party in Germany and others are a sign that in Europe itself, some people are saying this is madness and we have to go in another direction?
Well, I'm talking to you from Paris, France, and I've spent the last few days talking to various political forces. I must say, I'm not very confident that in Europe there will be a pushback. You know, I think the forces of reason are extremely weak. This is France. This is Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron's attitude to immigrants. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say this pretty strongly because I think it's accurate, in fact. I'm not making a judgment on his character. I'm not throwing words about. But Mr. Macron's attitude towards immigration is not unlike the Vichy government attitude towards immigration during the Nazi occupation of France. The way that Mr. Macron, Ms. Meloni in Italy, the Spanish government have gone on the rampage for pension reform. They want to reform pension. That means reform pension. By the way, sounds mild. You want to reform pension. Sounds well, maybe it's a bad thing, needs to be reformed. But what they mean is lift the pension age. That means have people work longer before they start getting benefits. Well, you're going to lift the pension. You'll also lift military spending. That's their attitude. That's what Jaishankar, in a sense, meant by the NATO mindset. They are willing to sacrifice their own people in order to build this military alliance. The rise of new political forces in Germany and so on, we'll have to see. They haven't been tested yet. All we have right now are polling data, and polls are extremely inaccurate when it comes to countries like Germany and so on. The electorate is pretty fickle. They can go anywhere. The country with the highest military spending in Europe is Poland. Poland spends up to 3.9% of its GDP on the military. Appalling welfare policies by that government. Now, no longer a government of the far right, but appalling welfare policies. Part of the problem, Eugene, is in Europe, as in Britain and in North America, United States and Canada, the gap between the right and the, let's call them the neoliberals, on bulk of policy making, the gap between, say, Macron and Marine Le Pen is so narrow that it stops your heart. I sat in the German parliament and listened to the debate around NATO and Ukraine, and it was striking. The Green Party and the Alliance for Deutschland sound the same, belligerent, nasty, arrogant about Germany's role in history. The Green Party and the Alliance for Deutschland, which is a near fascist party. Then you have the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats. They all sound the same. I mean, they have the same outlook. I'm not so confident that in the medium term, Europe is going to be able to turn things around. Tomorrow I go to Brussels. I'm going to have some events with the Workers' Party of Brussels. They are polling extremely well in that country. That's the country which is the headquarters of NATO. They are coming up to 15% in the polls. That's very significant in a country where most parties poll in that territory. That means they're up there with the major leagues. If the Workers' Party does well in the elections this year, they might put pressure on the various political forces in Belgium. And why are they doing so well? Because they are arguing against austerity. They are arguing against the rise of electricity prices. They have linked the ridiculous continuation of the war in Ukraine, now 2 years. They've linked that to the rise of bills in households, and they've built momentum. That's the kind of thing you need to see, a new kind of confidence, a new kind of clarity from forces of the people in Europe. And Europe has, for a long time, not had that. Delinquent in Germany was too scared to come out there and speak directly. I mean, look at European politics around the genocidal war in Gaza, the bombing and killing of the Palestinians. European political forces weak, unable to even criticize something so obviously as a genocidal war, which the International Court of Justice sits again right there in the Low Countries, said there's plausible evidence of genocide, and there's still silence from Macron, silence from Olaf Scholz. In fact, not silence. Olaf Scholz's government said there's no genocide, to which the Namibian government criticized them and so on. So I'm not confident the political situation in Europe. On the other hand, let's see what happens in the Belgian election. Because if the Workers' Party does well, it might increase the confidence of other forces to no longer be so careful, to be poll-driven, to focus test their morals. You can't build a political agenda at a time of multiple crises. You can't build a political agenda based on focus testing. You have to build it based on your understanding of the situation. And a lot of these parties have become effectively influenced by Blairism, Clintonism. Let's see what the polls say. Let's bring 10 people into a room and do some focus testing. Man, when you do that, you lost your soul. You have sold your soul to the devil.
Yeah, no, France even brought in presidential debates to be more like the United States. So we can see all those different pieces as always. Well, Vijay, we always appreciate you breaking down all these different pieces. Looking forward to your report from Brussels. Vijay Prashad, the executive director of the Tricontinental Institute. Thanks so much for being with us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks a lot. Take care of yourself.
Rania?
Eugene, all I know about to say about NATO is a big this. Come on. There it is. Yay. Hey, it didn't make me pause this time. Anyway.
Maybe that's why, you know what, let me not even say anything.
Are you going to blame me for VMix?
Nope. I wasn't going to say anything.
I know that's what you were going to say.
Listen.
You were going to say. I know you were going to say.
If you think it's about you, it is about you. So that's what they say.
Wow.
I didn't say it, but hey.
Wow.
Anyway, long story short, that will do it for us here today. I just want to say one more time, unfortunately, because we had some tech difficulties, we apologize again. We're not able to interview Mohammed Nabulsi on the fantastic new novel, Trinity of Fundamentals. So I just want to plug that again. You can see it there on your screen. You can go to 1804books.com, 1804books.com. It's a great novel. It is extraordinarily, it comes from Wissam Rafidi, Palestinian, part of the Palestinian Liberation Movement. It's a very, very rich text. I can't recommend it more higher. I haven't been able to put it down for the past 2 days. So get your copy. Literally thousands of them are being sold and being shipped out. Volunteers have had to be brought in to pack it in. So why is it that all these people are so excited about this novel? Well, I'll let you find out for yourself when you go to 1804books.com and check out The Trinity of Fundamentals by Wissam Rafidi. Please, please do. Rania, before we leave, what would you like our viewers to know?
Well, I would like our viewers to know that they can support independent media here at Breakthrough News by becoming a Breakthrough News member at patreon.com/Breakthrough News, where you can access exclusive content and merch. And lastly, I will add, for those who are watching, make sure you smash that like button. It helps boost us in the algorithm. Smash that like button. Like button. Yes.
Well... Thanks for that. Good note to end on. Kind of like, you know what? Let me not say anything mean. I'm going to end on a very positive note. Thumbs up to that. Big shout out to everybody here who is watching. Thanks to everyone, as always, for all your support of Breakthrough News. And we will continue to push forward here. So for myself, for Rania, for the whole Breakthrough News team, we will see you next time.